Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shout.
Alright, stop! No more fun! There's only darkness and disturbances from here.
But we can still have some fun, can't we? I mean, you try to have humor in your countdowns.
Well, yes, but I'm trying to set up a Halloween mood.
But Halloween can be fun.
I'm looking for the darker side of Halloween.
I mean, dark comedy is a thing, isn't it?
Can I please just try and set a mood? Thank you.
Is it just me, or does Shade seem incredibly ticked off every single time he talks to us?
Nope, it's him.
Good to know then.
Happy Hallows Eve, everyone. Gather around the fire as I relay tales about the time before time. It's no secret that the nearly decade-long saga of Bionicle can be extremely dark at points, especially in the latter years. But tonight, I want to focus specifically on the more disturbing elements. Whether it's a story beat, a character, or simply a concept, these are the aspects of Bionicle that disturb my core the most. What scares and disturbs one may vary, so please feel free to tell me what disturbed you the most in the comments. One more thing. Watch your back. You know, this segment was originally just going to be about Hortica Venom. I mean, if you want to discuss fates worse than death, being mutated into a monstrous form and potentially having your primal animalistic side taking over is a pretty good candidate. The most well-known case was obviously the Toa Metro being transformed into the Toa Hortica. And while yes, the mutation was reversed by Kitongu, Vakama came dangerously close to fully accepting his Hortica side and becoming no better than Arahi. That's not even taking into account the various other victims of Hortica Venom, such as various Rahi, the Hortica Dragons, and Savage. That being said, as I thought more about it, mutation is extremely common even outside of the Venom. So common in fact, one would think someone behind the scenes had a kink for it. Heck, I could do an entire video on its own regarding all the mutations that have occurred over the Bionicle storyline, but for the sake of this video's length, let's just review the cliff notes. Aside from the Vizrak's personalized poison, energized protodermis is the second most common source of mutation. Now, true, some of its uses has been used to transform one into a more powerful form, such as the Toa Mata into the Nuva, and 6 Borak into the Borak Kal, but none of the results are so nice and shiny. The more disturbing uses of energized protodermis, to me at least, came from the fusions, those being Takua to Nuva and the Golden Skin being. Some may question whether or not these count as mutations, but the genetic coding of these beings involved is still being altered, so I'll let it count. Now true, the resulting creations were extremely powerful, and the former didn't even last long before being split again, but when you get down to it, did anyone in these fusions really want this? Unlike other fusions like, let's say the Kaita, which was a willing fusion, the characters being fused did so unwillingly. Takua to Nuva was an accident, and the Golden Skin being was part of a ritual. One loses their individuality to be merged into a collective consciousness. If you were in one of these characters' shoes, would you really want that? Let's also not forget Rodaka's Roduka Spinner, turning not only the Toahaga into Rahaga, but Nariki into the crab-like monster we know and love? Let's go with love. Other examples include the mutagenic seawater found in the pit, turning the Baraki into freaks of nature while removing their ability to breathe air, the water from Karanui swamps mutating the Makuta down there and removing their abilities, the Paraka being reduced to spines and a head due to more strange liquids, Gardas, a Matoran being turned into one of the worst official builds ever, and the Shadow Matoran, being drained of their light while getting clawed feet and bat-like wings. Arguably the most tragic mutation of them all was Subterranean. Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was an ordinary Unimatoran, but after chemicals from a Gamatoran laboratory collapsed right on his head, he not only gained a horrendous build, I'm sensing a pattern here, but was mutated into a being so ugly that the Shadowed One considered that he was even uglier than the Frostalus. You know what is canonically considered one of the ugliest races in all of Bionicle? Throughout all these mutations, there's a common theme found in most of them. The transformed individuals ended up worse than they were before, and again, no one really wanted this. All I can think about is how I would feel if I were in the same position they were. I was sick of flesh, blood, and shadows. Thank you very much. No matter where you live in the world, chances are that there are myths, stories, and monsters created to scare people and keep all of them well behaved. the Chupacabra, the Doulahan, the Boogeyman. The Bionicle world had its own in the form of Karzani. Stories about the map being and the domain named after him were told amongst the Matoran to terrify them. Makuta Pterodax even named the precursor of the Morbuzak after the Bionicle Boogeyman himself. Thing is, as we learned in 2006, these weren't myths. Just about everything regarding both the being and his land is wrong in so many ways. Originally, he took Broken Matoran to his home to be fixed, but lacked the abilities of his brother, Artaka, and thus, the results ended up worse than before. At first, he sent the even more broken Matoran to islands where his failures could never be found, but after others discovered that these Matoran never came back, no more were sent his way. This turned him mad, and he kept the Matoran in his realm, ensuring they would never escape. Karzani himself, no matter his form, always looks like a monster, whether it's the mask of his original form looking as if it was fused from 4 other masks, or his mutated form with his long, pointed head and massive claws. But looks dwarf in comparison to his ability to give nightmarish visions of alternate timelines. Examples of this include Jala's vision, where he didn't sacrifice himself to save Takua, resulting in the Toe of Light never being found and Makuta taking over the island home, and Matoro's vision where his mission failed and Manui died, with the universe dying with him. His home isn't much better, and not just because of the broken Shadow Matoran that unwillingly call it home. It is described as a place where fire has no warmth, where the touch of ice burns, with volcanoes that spew ice, waterfalls made of dust, among other things that shouldn't even exist. It's like Wonderland, only replacing the whimsy with terror. Yes, if this place wasn't hellish enough, it's also the fact that any Matoran who sits for long enough will become stone. Not to nearly have mercy on you if you feel sleepy. No matter which way you look at it, Karzani and his world are about as disturbing and terrifying as the legends say. Honestly, it would have been better if they stayed stories. You know, I've been struggling to find the best way to open the segment, but I feel like the official passage from Island of Doom is faint enough.
Then, as if someone had thrown a switch, all talking ceased. One Matoran pointed up toward the south slope, indicating something that so far only he could spot. 6 Paraka, each armed with a launcher, advanced toward the Matoran from 6 different directions. They said nothing, only smiled. Shadows slithered like snakes over their faces and bodies, obscuring their expressions, with the exception of those ever-present malevolent grins. Before any of the villagers could cry out, Zaktan fired his launcher. The sphere flew rapidly through the air, struck a Komatoran, and passed into his body. Now the others began to fire, and the Matoran panicked, looking desperately for a place to flee. The high rock walls around the settlement had been meant to keep enemies out. On this terrible night, they served only to trap the Matoran inside with 6 monsters who lurched from the darkness, sowing fear and despair. Foolishly, the Matoran bunched together, making themselves easier targets. Those who were struck stood straight and still, waiting for orders. Hakan amused himself by sending some of the enslaved Matoran to capture and hold others long enough for his launcher to do its work. A gust of wind swept through the village, extinguishing the flames of the torches. The settlement was plunged into darkness, punctuated only by the cries of the Matoran and the dull, awful sound of spheres being launched and launched and launched. So, when am I going to get paid for this voiceover? Alright, I'll expect my check in the mail when you wake up.
Okay, I get this wasn't the first time a large group of Matorans has been mind-controlled, we'll get to that later, but prior events only showed the aftermath. This, we witnessed up close and personal, not to mention through how this event is written alone, I can't be the only one who gets vibes of a shooting. The panic, the anguish, the feeling of hopelessness. This may be more dark than anything, but the disturbance I feel in my heart is very real, my friends. Okay, I get this wasn't the first time a large group of Matorans has been mind-controlled, we'll get to that later. Well, that didn't take long. 2006 may be generally considered the year Bionicle went off the dark end, but let's not forget how disturbed 2002 could get. Oh sure, the idea of a faceless hive mind erasing everything in your homeland is creepy enough, but arguably the most disturbing moments come from the Krana. They control a Borok, but all that's needed is to pull a facehugger, and the victim becomes one with the swarm, losing their free will in the process. And the area that got hit the most was Lake Koro. Only 2 survivors, Kongru and Tamaru, managed to emerge from this. True, a year prior they were the infected masks, which served a similar purpose, but this takeover feels a lot more terrifying due to how many beings were affected. Now some of you might be asking, why is this higher than the Voyanui massacre? True, while we may have seen the attack on Voyanui itself, we spent about a year getting to know Lake Koro beforehand. Not to mention, we both know who Toalewa and Turaga Matau were, the protector and leader respectively, both victims of the takeover. Save for a few names heard once or twice, we barely know any of the brainwashed Matoran in Voyanui. This feels even more personal, more terrifying, more disturbing. Add to the fact that this event changed Lewa, making a happy-go-lucky character less so, it's very clear we weren't the only ones who were disturbed. Now before we get to number 1, I'd like to go over a few honorable mentions. I know for this number 1 spot, this is gonna be a weird opening, but what's with this plot twist? In my opinion, if I were asked what I felt the worst plot twist in all Bionicle was, it would be that the Borok are actually transformed Matoran. I mean, why? What does this add? What's the point of taking time away to talk about it? I mean, yeah, it's dark that what the Toa fought against prior were formerly Matoran, but if you remove this plot twist, would anything change? It feels like a twist for the sake of a twist, something only Shyamalan would be proud of. But then I noticed a startling realization on the Fridge Horror page on TV tropes. First off, what kind of name is Fridge Horror? Second, technically the Boxer were created by the Matoran to fight the Borok, and the Boxer are made of Borok parts. Oh my gosh! The idea of using your own race's body parts to fight members of your own race is beyond horrifying and disturbed. But here is the real kicker. What really gets this at the top spot. No one realizes this. The Toa don't discuss this as they find out about the Matoran's transformation, and as far as I'm aware, no one else besides the Great Beings know this information. If making the Boxer out of transformed Matoran parts was an intentional decision made by the Mananui Matoran themselves, that would be one thing, but they are completely unaware. This isn't just disturbing, but tragic as well. Perhaps it's better the Matoran don't know this. The mere idea of such a thing would most likely mentally scar them for life. Ignorance truly is bliss. I'm Shade200, and while I'm unsure if this realization was intentional or not, it does give a bit more credit to this unnecessary plot twist. Only a bit though. Happy Hallows Eve, and watch out for the horrors in your fridge. Godspeed everyone. Did they start dancing right after I left?
Yep.
Well, given how 2020's been, I can't say I blame them. They need the fun.
So could you.
Now that you mention it... Ronaldo, your strongest non-alcoholic beverage, please. Will Sprite work? If it can block out politics from my mind, I'll take it.